From the heart of Big Ten country, Los Angeles, California, Ryan Abraham and David Woods present the Podcast of Champions.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Podcast of Champions. I'm David Woods from Bruin Report Online, the UCLA site on the 24/7 Sports Network.
And I'm Ryan Abraham from USCFootball.com, the USC site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And together we make the Podcast of Champions, talking all things Big Ten football. Just had Big Ten Media Days. We're going to keep going into our deep dive previews. This week, we're doing a Saturday morning show. If you're watching live, thanks very much for watching on YouTube. We're going to talk Ohio State and Indiana. Real quick, if you want to email us, we have a new email, Big10Cast, spell out 10 @gmail.com, or you can also call or text us at 424-532-0678, and the Twitter is now B1G Podcast, so we've changed all that kind of stuff. We'll get to the reviews and stuff later on, but we got to welcome in our very first guest who's been covering the Ohio State Buckeyes for over 2 decades, 22 years to be exact. Dave Biddie does a great job covering the team for Bucknuts. Dave, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a major pleasure for us. We're going to get into my favorite person and his journey to.
This is
Ohio
not going to be a
State.
Chip Kelly segment.
We're going to get to that soon. I want to start with Ryan Day because this is such a interesting curiosity for me, because Ryan Day, by any objective measure, is a very, very successful head coach. Like very, very successful. I think he has 8 total losses. Is that correct? Yes, 56-8. He hasn't beaten Michigan in a few years. But the tenor around him, like the general sense I get from interview last year, just how he sounds a little bit embattled. And that just seems kind of crazy given his overall record. Can you give some insight into, I guess, the nature of Ohio State, Michigan, and how that can kind of just loom over everything? And also, is he like really embattled, or is this just kind of noise that happens in media?
He was definitely beaten down by the end of last season. After they lost to Michigan, and then they had a depleted roster in the bowl game, but they got stomped by Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, and you could tell he was downtrodden for sure. He's been rejuvenized by the offseason that they've had. It started with retaining all of these guys. I don't think any of them would have been first-round picks, but a lot of them would have been second-day picks, second-round, third-round guys. Maybe some guys would have been early third-day guys, fourth-round, fifth-round. They all came back. It was pretty amazing. And then to get some guys they got in the transfer portal, like Caleb Downs from Alabama, the safety, and Seth McLaughlin, the center, Quinshon Judkins, the running back, Will Howard, the quarterback. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think he's going to be good. And then the recruiting class they got, and then it just everything, and then getting Chip Kelly, as we talked off the air. I don't think Ohio State fans would want Chip Kelly here as head coach, but Ohio State fans are pretty jazzed that he's here as offensive coordinator. So everything that he's done, I sense I know Ryan pretty well. I sense a rejuvenized Ryan Day, like compared to where he was at the end of last season. And he knows he's a realist. He knows he has to beat Michigan this year. He's got the better roster by all measures. The game's in Columbus. They've lost to Michigan the last 3 years. He knows he has to beat Michigan this year. And we'll see. I mean, Michigan's defense will be good again. I think they might struggle offensively. But, yeah, I mean, it's your read was exactly right. He was definitely downtrodden at the end of last year, but I sense a more confident, relaxed Ryan Day heading into the season. We'll see how he looks in November.
The offseason has been, as far as Ohio State goes, I don't know how much better it could go. Obviously, seeing Michigan win the national championship, that's not a positive for the fans, but then you go all in on the offseason. And we love college football because you forget what happened already just a few months ago, and you're like, oh, well, Ohio State's crushing it in the offseason. What sort of changed? Was it the motivation factor of Michigan doing so well? Did the step up with NIL? Like, what's kind of attributed to the offseason you talked about with the recruiting class and all of the additions, getting a sitting head coach to be your offensive coordinator, but all of the additions from the transfer portal as well?
Yeah, there were a few main factors that you hit on. I mean, of course, like losing to Michigan 3 straight years is a big factor, and also Ohio State's been so close during the Ryan Day era. His first year in 2019, they had a really good team. They got to the playoffs. I think they probably would have lost to that Joe Burrow LSU team, but like they really outplayed Clemson in the semifinals that year. I was down there in the desert at Fiesta Bowl 2019, but hey, Trevor Lawrence came back and they pulled it. Clemson pulled it out. Some shaky calls in that game by the replay official, but that's a topic for another day. So they were very close in 2019. In 2020, they beat Clemson, get that monkey off their back. First time they had ever beaten Clemson. And then they lose to a great Alabama team in the national championship game. No fault there. But then it's like, and then 2022, even though they lost to Michigan, here they are. They still backed their way in the playoff. They outplayed Georgia in Georgia's backyard. Down there in the Peach Bowl, but lost by 1 point. They couldn't finish the deal. They've been so close. They've lost to Michigan 3 straight times. And then, as you mentioned, the NIL. So those are the 3 main things that I've seen is like they're very, very motivated to beat Michigan. They're also very motivated to just win the Big Ten and try to get that national championship. But the NIL. The NIL has been there for them. I think, Ohio State's benefited very much from NIL. Initially, they were kind of behind the curve, guys, which is interesting. Like, the first year or two of NIL, they were kind of behind the curve. And then the last, year or so, I mean, they, the 2 main collectives here in Columbus have done a really good job. So I think, and that's a big reason they were able to retain a lot of their guys. We'll talk about the brotherhood, and that's real. Those guys are very close. I've covered Ohio State for a long time. These guys really are legit, are close. But, like, wouldn't matter if the NIL wasn't right to get some of these guys to come back who would have been like 2nd round or 3rd round picks. So those are the 3 main factors, losing to Michigan 3 straight years, being so close on the national stage, but not getting it done. And then the NIL, taking care of your players. And I'm sure that's another reason they were able to get some of these guys they got in the transfer portal, like Caleb Downs, who could have went anywhere in the country.
And then I do want to get into Chip Kelly because it was such an interesting thing. So Ohio State was in a position where it had already hired an offensive coordinator, but he moved on. And so in this kind of time frame where Chip Kelly was basically interviewing for any open job that he could find, obviously his close friend Ryan Day was looking for an offensive coordinator. What's your sense of Chip Kelly so far? I mean, he's gone through a full spring. I'm sure he didn't have all of the ideal install time he would have wanted. But what's your sense of what he's going to bring to the table? And Ryan Day being an offensive guy, do you get the sense that it's going to be kind of a melding, or do you think Chip Kelly is going to have kind of free reign to run the offense he wants to run? What's your sense of things there?
Yeah, initially I thought it was going to be Chip would come in here and tweak things, but they'd be kind of like 50-50 almost. That's not how it's going to be. I mean, obviously Ryan Day is going to be heavily involved, but Chip's going to be calling the plays. And could Ryan veto it? I suppose, but Chip's going to be even more involved than I thought. Not that I didn't think he would be heavily involved, but I thought it would be more of a 50-50 split, like I said. But Chip's going to be the play caller, and it was an interesting process when Ryan decided he was going to take a step back and be more of a CEO, still obviously be heavily involved in the offense, but take a step back and give up play calling for the first time in his career. Chip was not available to be an offensive coordinator at the collegiate level. They talked, and this hasn't been public, but that, they wouldn't mind me putting this out there. Initially, Chip, as you guys know, he wanted to go be an offensive coordinator at the NFL level. Yep. He thought he was going to get the job with the Seahawks. Interview with the Seahawks was the runner-up for that job. While he was interviewing with the Seahawks, basically Bill O'Brien came available, and Ryan Day hired Bill O'Brien as his offensive coordinator. And then, like a week later, Jeff Hafley, ironically former Ohio State defensive coordinator under Ryan Day, leaves Boston College to be the defensive coordinator with the Green Bay Packers. And Bill O'Brien then goes to be the head coach at Boston College. Chip Kelly doesn't get the Seahawks job. Bam. And then Ryan Day hires him. And Ryan was very happy to have Bill O'Brien. He feels like Chip Kelly's even an upgrade there. So what's he going to bring? He's going to bring run concepts that Ryan Day hasn't been that good with. Ohio State's been a very good offense under Ryan Day. They've been a decent rushing offense, but they've been really good passing. Where they've struggled, guys, they were one of the worst teams in the country last year as far as if it was first and goal, second goal, third and goal. Anything to goal, Ohio State was bad. And I think Chip Kelly's going to add some run concepts. I think he's going to fix that problem for Ohio State, which is a big, big problem, and really has been a big problem ever since 2019, to be frank.
Yeah. So you just came back from Indianapolis. Ohio State kicked off it was the big show on day one, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like Wednesday, sort of you got the introduction to some of the new schools with USC and UCLA, and there were some interesting storylines there, new coaches and stuff. And then, the last day having like Oregon and Washington, all that. But Ohio State was sort of like the main topic. That's what everyone was talking about on day one there, hearing from Ryan Day and all that. What did you kind of learn from Ryan Day and the players there in Indy from what you saw?
Yeah, it feels like they're embracing their failures, I guess, to say the last 3 years. They're not hiding from it. They recognize that and Ryan Day will say things like, we understand you can go 11-1 at Ohio State and that's not good enough. So that was one thing that stood out. They seem to be embracing the fact that they know they've fallen well short of their goals the last 3 years. I also noticed I thought it was interesting. Ryan Day completely is not trying to like coach speak about the offensive line. If Ohio State can get good, not even great, good play out of quarterback and offensive line, they're going to be dangerous this year because they're really good at every other position group. Linebacker, maybe that's a stretch to call them really good. I think they'll be good at linebacker. But if they can be good at quarterback, good on the offensive line, that'll be huge. Ryan Day, I thought he might talk around it a little bit. I asked him the question on Tuesday. He said, offensive line will make or break our season. He seems pretty confident Will Howard at quarterback. Will Howard still needs to prove it, but I do think Will Howard will be solid. The offensive line is the biggest question mark, gentlemen. If that can be good, Ohio State will be very good. And I think, there's reason for optimism there. If you're an Ohio State fan, it's a sneaky veteran offensive line. They will have 3 third-year starters and 2 second-year starters. So no first-year starters and pretty veteran. And I think they'll be improved on the offensive line. That's another thing Chip Kelly's going to bring to the table. He'll do a good job helping out Justin Fry, who frankly has not, been that great of an offensive line coach and hasn't been that great of a recruiter since he's been here. Chip Kelly will help Justin Fry out a lot with that offensive line.
I mean, Chip Kelly, I got to do it. Chip Kelly already coached him once. He was his offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at UCLA. So I don't know. Maybe he's part of the problem. But the offensive line generally, I think it's a couple years now where I think Ryan Day has kind of circled that as a potential issue. I think at media days last year, he may have said something about the offensive line being, kind of the make or break. What do you attribute that to? Is that maybe just like a slight deficit in recruiting? Did some evaluations not pan out? Has it been a developmental issue, or what do you kind of attribute? Because it's so Ohio State's obviously this monster recruiting power, can seemingly pick and choose guys in a lot of ways. So why has that been kind of a deficit for Ohio State?
Yeah, I'd have to point to recruiting, and it hasn't been bad, but it's just been that's why last year's team was not good on the offensive line. Now, were they terrible? No. I mean, if they were good against mediocre teams, but then when the chips were down, I mean, Michigan's defensive line was fantastic last year. I mean, I'm not breaking news there, but Michigan's defensive line had its way with Ohio State's offensive line. Now, so last year Ohio State's offensive line was not good, and I put that on recruiting. But again, Donovan Jackson was a 5-star. He'll be a third-year starter this year. He was a second-year starter last year, but he didn't play like a 5-star. The previous year, they had a really good offensive line in 2022. They had Paris Johnson Jr., who ended up being the first offensive lineman off the board in the 2023 draft to the Cardinals. They had a guy, DeJuan Jones, a big, massive guy at right tackle, ended up slipping into the 4th round with the Browns, but he was a really good right tackle. And then they had a surprise, a center, Luke Whippler, left way earlier than anybody expected. He was a third-year sophomore. He left, slipped all the way to the 6th round. He should have came back. That kind of threw everything in a loop last year, but now they feel pretty good about it. Now some of these guys, like Donovan Jackson, for example, is a senior now. Is he going to live up to that 5-star billing? They got a pretty good transfer they brought in last year. He'll be a second year at Ohio State this year. Josh Simmons, who they like at left tackle. Josh Fry at right tackle is a guy who's a pretty good recruit. So we'll see. But yeah, to answer your question, I put it mostly on recruiting. Justin Fry just has not, and he hasn't been here that long, but just has not. And we'll see. Maybe he can change that, later this year. He just really hasn't landed that big fish from out of state yet.
I want to talk about the schedule a little bit. Obviously, expectations are through the roof, especially with the offseason that Ohio State, the Buckeyes have had. It looks pretty interesting. I'll put it up on the screen for people, but the trip to Oregon, it's going to be one of the games of the year. Not really anything tough out of conference wise. Getting Ohio. You
mean Texas?
Huh?
You mean Texas in the opener?
No, Akron.
Oh, wait, I'm looking at the wrong year.
Yeah,
My bad.
I was gonna
Oh,
say.
God.
Oh my God, Akron, not quite Texas, but Iowa. You get Iowa at home. Get a road game to Penn State. Michigan's going to be at home, but that trip to Eugene is going to be one that everyone's going to be watching and circling. But what do you kind of make of the schedule and your thoughts on the expectations for this season? Which it's seems like a national championship or bust kind of year.
Yeah, and I'm never a national championship or bust guy. I think I might, have to break my rule this year because that's what Ohio State is saying. So, but it's so hard to win a national title. It's going to be harder this year with more teams. The schedule is fascinating to me, guys, because it's so interesting. Okay, the non-conference schedule couldn't be any easier for Ohio State, right? And then they play, four Big Ten teams that have no chance of doing anything, right? And then they play four Big Ten teams who are picked in the top 6 by everybody. So you have the only team in the top 5 or 6 that the Buckeyes don't play is USC. Everybody has it in whatever order: Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, USC, Penn State, Iowa. Ohio State plays all of those teams except for USC. But then they play, so it's basically a 4-game regular season for them. Iowa here in Columbus, obviously at Oregon, that's going to be a huge game. Everybody's picking at Ohio State, Oregon 1-2 in the Big Ten, it seems like. And then Penn State on the road, even though that's going to be probably at noon, not at night. That Penn State looks at Ohio State as their biggest rival. Ohio State does not reciprocate. That's always a tough game when Ohio State goes over there. Penn State's only beaten them one time in a long time. That was 2016, but it's always tough. That'll be a tough game. And then Michigan here in Columbus. I don't see anybody else really giving them a game, but those 4 games, maybe not Iowa, but Iowa will be tough. But the fact that it's here in Columbus, I don't know if Iowa's going to be able to keep up with them. I'll give Iowa their credit, though. I'll say it's a 4-game regular season. So it's very, very interesting. You're going to have 8 games that people are going to be like, this is like an exhibition game, and then 4 games where people are locked in, especially those 3 huge wins: Oregon, Penn State, Michigan.
Touching on like kind of that national championship or bust. I mean, and I agree with you. It should be, playoff or bust. Do you think that's fair for this season?
Well, with 12 teams, probably not. If you're asking the average Ohio State fan, just making the playoffs probably wouldn't be enough. I think if you beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship, win a game in the playoff, but fall short of I wouldn't call that a failure. That's for sure. Maybe some Ohio State fans would, but that's why it's so tough being a national championship or bust guy. You don't know about injuries. And even if you're relatively fortunate with injuries, the ball still has to bounce your way. And now it's going to be, 3 times as tough to win it with the triple amount of teams. But yeah, man, it's I wouldn't say just making the playoffs is good enough. Not with this roster.
Yeah, it's funny because 2 years. You mentioned 2 years ago losing to Michigan, backing into the playoffs and being a missed field goal away from essentially winning a national championship because Ohio State would have, wiped the floor with TCU. What would Ohio State fans think of a year like that, where you lose to Michigan but you win the championship? Like, I think you're like losing to Michigan and then like making the playoffs. Like that's not good enough. But losing to Michigan and like winning a title, that you're probably like, okay, we'll take that one.
For sure. That's like, it was so weird, but you're right. They were on the verge of doing that. Like like the mantra is basically like, no season is acceptable if you lose to Michigan, if you're Ohio State. But the caveat would be unless you win the national championship, which is crazy. And now that would be more of a possibility. Obviously, it's crazy that almost happened. It's crazy that almost happened, but it almost did. And they, what's interesting, Ohio State fans, and I'm talking to like national reporters and fans from around the country, it seems like Ohio State got a little bit of street cred back with that Georgia game. Playing Georgia. I think a lot of people thought Georgia was going to smoke Ohio State in that semifinal. But yeah, man, that was crazy that they were that close to winning the national championship, despite getting beat by Michigan in Columbus. And the game wasn't even really that close. It was close in the first half, and then Michigan took control in the second half.
Yeah.
With kind of NIL and the competitive nature of recruiting, obviously Ohio State is now very well positioned. But kind of the nature of recruiting has changed. It used to be, very regional, and, you got to beat, for like West Coast teams, it was, you got to really contend with USC and Oregon and Washington. But for Ohio State, who's competitive with them at this point? Obviously, Oregon has a bunch of NIL money, but when they're in battles and they have a chance to lose, who's it usually against?
Yeah, Oregon right now has become like they're in a lot of battles with Oregon. They don't go head to head with Michigan too often. That used to be the main one, way back in the day.
Yeah,
hasn't been like that for a while. Michigan used to make their hay like coming into Ohio and recruiting Ohio. They still recruit Ohio. Got a really good running back from Ohio this past year. He'll be a freshman this year at Michigan. But it used to be like half their roster back when Bo Schembechler was the coach and Lloyd Carr was the coach. So Notre Dame, they go head-to-head with Notre Dame quite a bit. And that's one that hasn't changed over the years. That's a regional one. Penn State a little bit, not too much. And now it's turned into, so Oregon's the one on the West Coast, and they'll go head-to-head with a lot of Southern schools too. Right. Georgia, which, Buckeye fans will always have some trepidation when it's like, oh, gosh, it's Ohio State or Georgia. Right now they're down to basically, it's not this simple, but David Sanders Jr. is the number one offensive tackle in the country in the 2025 class. It seems like an Ohio State-Tennessee battle there. They go head-to-head with Alabama, which is now a little bit more tenable if you're Ohio State now that Saban's not there, but still tough. So, so those are some of the schools that they battle with.
Last thing for me, and I really appreciate you coming on and kind of talking about all this stuff. It's all been really interesting. I would say if you follow Ross Dellinger's work, he does a great job over at Yahoo and has been all over this House settlement, House versus NCAA settlement, and some of the details that came out yesterday where commissioners had proposed this, and it seems like this is what's going to happen. There's a massive increase in the number of roster spots, which instead of limiting, they can't limit total scholarships because that would be antitrust kind of stuff. So they're going to just say, here's a roster size, and you can have as many scholarships as you want. Ohio State has a massive athletic department. I've talked to people that work in athletic administration, and they're like, you can't fund all of these. Like, just because you have 45 scholarships for lacrosse, you can't fund that. It's untenable. You can't do that. Have you heard anything from the Ohio State athletic department knowing that you could be millions and millions of dollars more in scholarship costs every year if you try to fund all these things, and maybe fans expect that? I don't know if it, from the Ohio State perspective, because it's one of the bigger athletic budgets in the country, what you've kind of heard from Ohio State.
Nothing so far, and it's very interesting. I'm with you. I think it's highly interesting. And yeah, now instead of the 85 scholarship limit, you can have 105 kids on scholarship. Nobody is a walk-on anymore. It's crazy. It's crazy, all the changes that we've seen in college sports. Another one that's interesting, and again, I can't wait to interview Ohio State AD Ross Bjork, who just really took over. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask him. And baseball is fascinating to me. I'm not going to go long on this, but baseball for years, each college baseball team had 11.7 scholarships to give. 11.7.
0.7. Where the hell do you come up with 0.7?
I know, right? And then people are like, hey, the guy was on a third of a scholarship. Yeah, because you have a team of 40 dudes. You got to split this stuff up. The really good guys are on full rides. Now you get 34 full scholarships in baseball, basically tripling the amount of scholarships.
Yeah.
It's crazy everything we're seeing in sports. But to answer your question, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you there what Ohio State's going to do, but I tend to think they'll find the money to fund it, at least for football. I don't know about the Olympics.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about this later in the show when Dave and I kind of just do this. But yeah, we'll kind of give our thoughts. It's just, this just came down yesterday, and but I think for fans that expect, they're going to have 34 baseball scholarships. First of all, with Title IX, now you're going to need to add that many, 20-something scholarships of a women's sport, and every one of those costs over $100,000 a year. I think. Usually you're just used to pushing the limits. I just don't think athletic departments are going to be able to push the limits. Maybe they pick a sport we're going to be really good at baseball, but we're going to drop 3 other men's sports. I don't know, but there's going to be some tough decisions made going forward.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, Ryan. It's just, again, I just keep repeating myself. The major changes we've seen in the last 4 years with NIL, the transfer portal. Now this with whoever thought we'd just go to, and it's kind of almost flying under the radar. Oh yeah, we're just getting rid of the 85 scholarship limit. It's been a huge thing for a long time. How are you going to manage the 85? Where are we at with the 85? The 85. Now it's 105. Who cares? And it's that's a minor change compared to some of the things we've seen. It's insane to me.
And overall roster size is going to go down. It's the walk-on situation.
Yeah.
So many of these programs, they do build a little bit through walk-on programs, and those are going to be either curtailed or, as we're saying, potentially maybe they don't want to invest so much money in scholarships, and so they don't end up doing that. But it's going to be a whole new world, and I think this is one of the, paying players, they're still players, but this is one of those changes that I think is going to affect kind of structurally how do you construct a team? Yeah. It's going to be very different.
Awesome.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about college football is seeing the walk-ons, make an impact and then earn that scholarship. So I don't know. It's just one of those crazy things that we've seen in college football lately.
All right. Dave Biddle does a great job covering the Ohio State Buckeyes. From Bucknuts, go to bucknuts.com. We really appreciate you coming on. We, legitimize our show a little bit here. Yeah. We are the foremost authority talking Big Ten football, obviously, because, this is our third show doing it.
Yes. Yeah. We're in the heart of Big Ten country out here.
Looking forward to talking with you down the road. So thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, fellas.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute talking Indiana football. All righty. We are back here. We got our guest in. I'm going to add the...
Ryan's trying to multitask.
I got to multitask. We're add his shots here and stuff. David, I will put you on and get your thoughts on what was going on there
with Ohio State.
Yeah,
it's interesting talking to a program that doesn't really have flaws. Like the only flaw is essentially like fan base hubris, where it's just, well, we think we should be the best in the world, and so when we're not, we get sad and mad. But like. You heard it from Dave, and this is basically the subtext of what he was saying about NIL, is all of the disappointment from the last few years fueled their NIL. All of the disappointment of going 22-4 in the last two seasons, with only Big Ten losses to Michigan, and that's it. Don't lose any other Big Ten games, but only lose to Michigan. And the disappointment of that fueled them to, top 5 NIL. That's crazy. That's a different beast of a program. And it's, something like, I think USC in its heyday, like go back to the Pete Carroll years, kind of behaved like that. Oregon isn't quite there yet. Like this is, it's interesting to talk to the powers in college football because there hasn't really been one in the Pac-12 as we've, been discussing for a long time. USC again 20 years ago, but not now. So it was just interesting getting the perspective of, because we talked to all the publishers of all the Pac-12 sites for the longest time. We've talked to Rutgers and Illinois so far, but talking to, a rep from the, one of the big cheeses in college football.
All right. Well, speaking of big cheeses, let's talk Indiana.
That's right.
We got Jared Kelly coming in.
This is more our speed here.
This is definitely. Peegs.com. I've known Peegs for many years. We were together back in the Rivals days. But Jared, thanks for joining us. I know I had to do the little transition, add the shots here behind the scenes, so let David opine for a little bit. But how you doing, man?
I'm good. It's funny hearing you guys go from Ohio State talk to Indiana football talk. I feel like, those two things cannot be more opposed, but we're glad to have you guys in the conference. I'm sure it's just as weird for you guys.
Very
much so.
Indiana's traveling out to UCLA this year, so it should be fun.
That should be fun. It's one of the it's the opening game for I think both in Big Ten play. Indiana. So obviously a big transition in the offseason, bringing in Curt Cignetti as the new head coach coming in from JMU. He's got a great pedigree. I think if people just think of him as the JMU coach, but I mean, he started out as Alabama's, not started out. This was deep into his career, but he worked under Nick Saban, has had a bunch of success as a head coach just at lower levels, and now comes into Indiana. I guess first, my opinion, this feels like an awesome hire for Indiana. Feels like them trying to be serious and, actually put their best foot forward. But what's been your impression so far of Cignetti and what he's bringing to the table and what kind of changes you're seeing in the program so far?
I think the biggest thing, and I'm sure you guys saw this at Big Ten Media Days on Thursday, the last day, he certainly doesn't mince his words, but who he was on that podium at Big Ten Media Days and at Lucas Oil was, how he's been since he arrived in December. This is a guy who is, if he likes your question, he's going to give you a 10-minute answer. If he doesn't like your question as much, he might give you a 3-word answer. And he strongly believes in what he believes in, which is his blueprint that's worked everywhere he's been, James Madison, Elon, all these lower level schools. Like he said, I don't know if you guys had seen this in one of his media availabilities back in the winter. someone asked him, what's your recruiting pitch to recruits? And he says, I win, Google me. And that was it. Just Google me. So that's kind of the Spark Notes version of what you're getting with Cignetti. He shoots you straight. He's, I think for some people, he might be a little too out there, a little too brash, considering IU has not played a game yet. But I think ultimately this is good for IU, right? You need someone with swagger and not only, blind confidence, but someone who's done it over many years. He has a track record of winning wherever he's been. And people are talking about IU football, and that's ultimately, that matters right now for a first-year head coach.
Yeah. It's really interesting because the vibes I get from him, and this is a vibes show, but you might not remember this, but we do. Jim Harbaugh, his first media days at Pac-12 when he was taking over Stanford, was really kind of came with a little bit of arrogance, kind of came with a little bit of swagger, like a little bit of juice. And it was so weird because Stanford was just the absolute dregs of the conference and had been forever. And I'm not trying to denigrate Indiana football. Don't think I am, listeners out there. But, not obviously a top-tier program in the Big Ten. I think having a guy like that who can come in and say stuff like, speaking of UCLA, I think the quote was something like, it's a team in an old stadium and we're going to kick their ass or something like that, which is great. Absolutely great. That's the exact attitude Indiana needs to have. And absolutely, you could fall flat on your face and it could be a disaster, but have that attitude. And I think it impresses some people. What are you seeing so far in recruiting? Has that attitude paid off a little in recruiting so far? Or do you think it's going to take a season of performance to do so?
No, you're definitely seeing it right away. One of the first moves they made, the staff within, I want to say 2 weeks of getting on campus, they were able to get a 4-star quarterback, Tyler Cherry. He was a Duke commit, decommitted from Duke, and then IU ultimately, the new staff within a few weeks was able to get him committed to IU. And obviously, as I'm sure you guys are aware, over in USC land, IU is still going after Julian Lewis, the 5-star quarterback. He has known the Indiana quarterbacks coach Tino Sinceri since he was 8 years old. So obviously that's a huge connection. And just even guys that IU isn't maybe going to get, they're getting them on campus at the very least. And these are guys that are 4 stars, high 3 stars. You're seeing their recruiting footprint sort of all over the U.S. as opposed to the previous staff was maybe more concentrated. And I ultimately think, getting players like Julian Lewis, even if he doesn't come to Indiana, which, is probably a long shot, but, even just getting him on campus twice is, going to raise some eyebrows for other recruits in the future. And you never really know, how impactful that could be for other recruits to say, hey, Julian Lewis took a long look at IU. Maybe I should do the same.
Right.
So you combine that with the sort of juice that Cignetti has, I think, and his staff. And how they're able to sort of work a room, if you will. I think you're already seeing it in the 25 class, but I think even beyond, if IU can start really winning and consistently go to bowl games, I think you're really going to start to see that the recruiting pick up.
You get a little Dion vibes, maybe too. Remember, he's maybe a little brash when he came into things. Obviously, the Big Ten makeup is completely different now, and we'll get into thoughts about Big Ten Media Day coming up. But I just want to get from the Indiana perspective, adding 4 new teams, all of which hierarchy-wise on football would probably be ranked ahead, or I guess you could argue with UCLA. But the good thing is no longer part of the Big Ten East, which was just absolutely brutal to have Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in your side of the division every year. So I don't know, some good, some bad. What have been the overall thoughts of the new look Big Ten going forward from an Indiana perspective?
I think the biggest thing is definitely what you had mentioned, the getting rid of the divisions. And that was really one of Indiana's biggest handcuffs since the division started, 9-10 years ago, was you really had to win all 3 of your non-conference games, no questions asked, and then somehow find a way to win all the games that weren't Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, because IU hasn't beat those teams in however long. So I think that's the biggest thing from an IU perspective. And this is a program that's still building. They know they're not going to be on the same level as the USCs or the Oregons or even the Washingtons right now, obviously after what they did last year. But they're building, and these West Coast teams I think can kind of only help them. You've seen IU sort of like I had mentioned with the recruiting, sort of make their footprint bigger. They're going to go out. We've seen them go out towards the West Coast a little bit, and now that you can call that Big Ten country a little bit. That can only help too.
Not a little bit.
We're in the heart of Big Ten country, right
Los Angeles, California. No,
that's right, baby.
Yeah, we're kidding.
The quarterback situation is really interesting to me. I shouldn't say really interesting. The one thing that Cignetti is doing is classic head coach BS. He's not naming a starter at quarterback. It's Curtis Rourke, right? Like he's going to be the starter. It's just he's playing games right now.
Yeah, no, unless he gets injured or some crazy meteor strikes Bloomington, it's going to be Curtis. It'll be Curtis Rourke week 1. This is a kid who has 5 years of experience. 2022 MAC Player of the Year at Ohio. He's going into a 6th year. Now this guy is, he transferred to IU. They brought him to IU to start week 1. And with Rourke, it's interesting because you see his stats and all the things he did at Ohio, but this is obviously the Big Ten level, and he was very accomplished in the MAC. But I will be interested to see if he can translate it because he has the tools. I think he's going to be a very good game manager. I think he only threw like 10 picks or something or 12 picks in 5 years in Ohio. Yeah. Never fumbled the ball once.
Wow.
So he's going to be a very good game manager. Really good ball security. Now, will he go and win you a game, against opponent of your caliber? I don't know. We'll have to see. I do like the weapons Indiana has on offense, but that quarterback position, Indiana has not had stability there, even going back to Michael Penix because he was hurt so much. So it's been a long time. So going into this season, it's finally sort of a breath of fresh air. You kind of know what the pecking order is there, even if Cignetti won't say it.
It's like, we're not going to know. He's definitely the starter. You mentioned like what Cignetti had to say or his kind of, impression he made on people at Big Ten Media Day. What kind of stuff did you learn from an Indiana perspective from the players and Cignetti there from what you saw?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned off to the top, who you saw, the Cignetti you saw at Big Ten Media Days is who he's been, every single time we've talked to him since he's been at IU. That's who he's been. And talking to the players, we didn't get to talk to the players a whole ton during spring camp, but now that we had a chance to talk to them at Big Ten Media Days, you really get the feel that, in the locker room, these guys love it. There might be some fans that are like, this is too over the top, but the players love it. They love a coach that's going to, stick up for them. That's going to guarantee them wins as much as you can, obviously. They're with the whole vibe and everything. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the locker room there. And I think too, a lot of coaches, first year coaches want to talk about culture shifts. We gotta change the culture of this program. But I think it's a very real thing at Indiana. Everybody looks at Cignetti as the one leader of the program. He's made that very clear since the day he got there. And everybody's following that one leader, the players included. I think they really understand, this guy's a winner. We didn't come here to lose. This might be Indiana, but we're not here to lose. And I really do think you're going to see that radiate, just throughout the whole program.
Obviously a huge transfer class. I think 31 incoming transfers. Sometimes those counts are a little bit off, but somewhere in the 30s. A ton of guys coming in from JMU, along with Cignetti. Are a lot of these names? I mean, I think it's 12 JMU guys coming in. Are a lot of these guys expected to start? Given their familiarity with what Cignetti runs and his expectations, and kind of a follow up to that, did you notice a significant, talent level bump up this spring from what you've seen in the past?
To start with the first question, the JMU question, yeah, I would expect a vast majority of these guys are going to come in and either start or just, obviously starting in football is, just a title. But they're going to play a lot of snaps. these are guys who are all Sun Belt selections. They're the leader of their positions at JMU. You think of a guy like D'Angelo Pons. He was a freshman All-American last year at James Madison. And, when he entered the portal, a host of Power 5 schools were after him. Indiana was obviously able to use their connections there a little bit and get him to come to IU. So that was big. You look at Aiden Fisher, middle linebacker. He's they call him the quarterback of the defense at James Madison. He's coming over playing for the same defensive coordinator at IU. He's going to be huge. IU also got two offensive linemen who started at James Madison, who IU needed more starters this year to kind of replace the outgoing ones from last year. And then Elijah Surratt, he was one of the highest graded PFF receivers in the country last year. Prolific numbers at JMU. He's coming over, going to be in the same offensive system under Mike Shanahan, the offensive coordinator, coming over from James Madison. So you look at those guys, it's definitely a talent infusion there. Now, I know that, like you had mentioned, I think the one big knock on Indiana and why people are kind of reserved or holding their judgment for now, is all these transfers. While they did post, tons of numbers at the previous school, a lot of them are Group of 5 players coming up. As I'm sure you guys have seen, not all of them are going to work out. You can just, you just hope that you have the depth there, the talent there to kind of make up for the ones that don't work out.
Yeah. Some of those guys do really good. I mean, you're a good football player. You're a good football player a lot of times. Yeah. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out there roster-wise. Schedule-wise, we talked about no more East, which is great. Still get Ohio State. It's not, Rutgers got a kind of nice first-year schedule in this new world. But
yeah, they don't play any of Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, or Ohio State.
Right. Indiana does get both Michigan and Ohio State. No Penn State, at least there. You get Washington, which may be a Michael Penix revenge or something coming to Bloomington. But what do you kind of make of the Indiana schedule, and where do you see some opportunities for, hey, was it one, winning one game or whatever, the Big Ten, or two, like trying to make a bowl game this year?
Yeah, no, this is definitely one of the most favorable schedules IU's had in a long time, and it's because of the going away from the divisions. IU, I think at one point was scheduled for a non-conference game against Louisville, and for a program like IU, you can't afford to have non-con games, just give them away like that, right? Because at this point, it doesn't matter the caliber of wins for IU. We just IU just needs to get to a bowl game. That's the goal in the first season. Now, Curt Cignetti might tell you they're shooting for much higher, but that is the foremost priority is get to a bowl game, get to 6 wins, doesn't matter how. So you get FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte at home in the non-conference. Assuming all goes well, you're 3-0 coming out of the non-con, and then you have that UCLA game on the road, obviously sandwiched between. But there's a whole lot of winnable games here. You think of teams on sort of Indiana's level in the Big Ten, the Marylands, Northwesterns. You can even throw the Nebraskas based on how they've been the past couple of years. Yep. Purdue, obviously. So there's a lot of
UCLA
opportunity.
Hey. But yes,
that one might be tough. I'm interested to see how they're going to do it at UCLA going on the road, and obviously it's going to be their first time, everyone's first time traveling.
And such a raucous environment there at the Rose Bowl. I think there might be. This is before school starts, so there might be a total of 32,000 people in the stands.
They have to have like a basketball game as an exhibition.
Yeah,
Like you should do that too.
Outdoor round ball out there and before the game. That'll work.
Yeah, that would be electric.
But a better schedule, and that I think. When you have a new coach like that coming in, you do. I mean, he's going to talk big. Hey, we want to go to the Big Ten championship game and all that. But it looks like as Indiana could make a bowl game for sure, which would be a big step up and some momentum to build for his like year 2, year 3 running the program.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the goal this year has to be get to 6 wins. Doesn't matter how you do it. Cignetti is huge on, the one phrase he's used since he got here is no self-imposed limitations. He says at every press conference, no self-imposed limitations on the program. But 6 wins is very doable, I think. You get 8 home games this year, which is huge. Yeah. You only have to go on the road 4 times. I think a lot of IU fans have talked themselves into an 8-win season, 7, 8, 9-win season. I think 6 wins, if you get to 6 wins, everything after that, 7 wins, 8, everything after that is just icing on the cake.
Let let me divulge something here because I do my picks. We do our picks on this show, and I've already done them. Ryan will have to do them soon. But I pick every game for each team in the conference we cover. We can now cover the Big Ten, and we are the foremost experts on the Big Ten, obviously. I've got Indiana going 7-5.
All right.
Because I think Cignetti. So I think he, like we've been talking about, he's got some juice. He's bringing in a quarterback who, if you go back 2 years, Curtis Rourke at Ohio was a ridiculous, like insane quarterback. Last year he was like a little bit worse, but 2 years ago he was amazing. I think they could be a dangerous team. I don't think they're beating Michigan or Ohio State, but I think they're going to clean up on some of those the weaker programs that they're playing this year. But Indiana, so where it's positioned in the world of college football, so much about all of these programs is dependent on NIL these days. I think you could argue it's a reason USC is still struggling to break through a little bit with Lincoln Riley, but I think some programs have kind of boosted their profile because of NIL. Where does Indiana stand in the competitive money race that is recruiting these days? And is there opportunity? Is there potential for it to get more, or is it better than we think? What's your sense of NIL with Indiana?
Yeah, if you had asked me that a year ago, it would not be nearly as positive. And I think a lot of that was because a lot of the fan base, the boosters, had soured on Tom Allen a lot. And they're like, why are we going to give our money to a program that's going downhill clearly? But as soon as Cignetti was hired and you heard him speak and you saw his track record, a lot of boosters did start getting on board. And we've seen the NIL pool, definitely take make strides. I'm not going to say it's by any means good compared to the rest of the Big Ten, but it's enough, right? Like you had mentioned with the transfers, 31 new transfers. Obviously, a lot of those guys are going to want NIL. And they were able to get some guys who were, getting chased after by a ton of Power 5 programs in the portal. So you see IU was able to flex a little bit of its NIL dollars there. You think of a guy like Donovan McCauley. He was in the transfer portal as a 4-star transfer, according to 247. I think like Florida State wanted him, a couple other schools. Carter Smith, left tackle starter from last year. I think he took a visit to Ole Miss in the transfer portal. IU was able to get him back. Those two guys, they're going to want money, right? And then a lot of these other transfers as well. So I think you definitely have seen more of a commitment, both internally within the athletic department, and then donors wanting to give their money, wanting to put their money behind Cignetti. And then I think if Indiana goes bowling this year, or go 7-8 wins this year, you're going to really start to see the NIL skyrocket. But as it is right now, obviously a lot of it's behind IU basketball because that's just how IU set up.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a while to get football to where it needs to be, but it's not nearly as perilous as it was maybe a year ago.
Is Mark Cuban involved? I've heard some rumors or something about that before. I don't know, but is he involved at all?
Maybe.
Wow. Okay. So yes. All right. That's cool. Yeah. Well, you get someone like that. Like obviously for Oregon, you have Phil Knight, who wants to put all his power behind trying to get Oregon to win. I think he's invested like $1 billion in Oregon athletics, which is insane. But if you get a billionaire like Mark Cuban, like I went there, I can give a few million here, a few million there. Like that's like a game changer for some schools. So that'll be interesting to see going forward. Anything else, David? Or
one kind of final question, because Indiana and UCLA obviously have similar. What would be the word? Like major sport profiles. I know for UCLA, a lot of fans, especially on the football side, get very annoyed when it's referred to as a basketball school because they feel, well, been to Rose Bowls, we've done some things, just not anytime recently, and they care about football. Do Indiana fans who are more football centric? First, do they exist? Are there Indiana fans who are more football centric? And second, do they get a little annoyed when Indiana gets referred to as a basketball school?
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, there are IU football fans. They're not many. I think you'll start to see that grow a little bit if IU can win some games. But no, I think when you think of IU, even if football might be your favorite sport or Indiana football might be the favorite thing to watch, it's a basketball school.
Yeah.
And I don't think people get slighted. I think where people do get slighted, and this might be new to you guys coming over from the West Coast, we have this thing called reverse jacket fans, where people will be IU basketball fans and Notre Dame football fans.
There are many UCLA basketball and USC football fans. They are a sick group of people.
Yeah. What do you call a reverse jacket? I don't know if I heard that. That's good.
Yeah, you just turn it inside out when the weather turns cold.
That's amazing. I love that.
Awesome. Well, Jared Kelly, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing some insights on Indiana football. You go back to Antoine Randall L. USC ended up hiring, I don't know if you covered Dylan McCullough when you were there. Yeah, so Dylan McCullough was the running backs coach. So Indiana was, I think 3 or 4 guys, running backs, went into the NFL, and he was recruiting players from like SEC country to come run at Indiana. And they all, a bunch of them moved on to the NFL. Clay Helton really never hired anyone good as far as assistants go, and that was the one hire he made. He left for 1 year for Kansas City, but we've seen some levels of success there at Indiana. We'll see if you can get back to it. So, but again, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jared.
All right. Take care, buddy. Thank you so much. All right. David, successful Saturday morning of talking Ohio State and
a beautiful morning.
Indiana.
It's a beautiful morning.
And I got it. Hopefully, I got the thing smooth.
I think you were super smooth. I mean, you cut off Jared there at the end, sadly for him.
I cut him off?
Yeah, you cut him off. He was saying something, and you were just like, all right, thanks, buddy.
Oh.
But you were focused.
I was trying to,
You were focused. You were locked in. You were ready to go.
Oh, well, my apologies to Jared.
I mean, he's got a vendetta against us now, but that's fine.
Well, most people do.
Yeah, they should.
Welcome back from Maui.
Thank you.
You were in Maui.
I was in Maui.
Again on vacation.
Always on vacation.
Why are you always on vacation?
I don't know.
Good for you, though. Was it fun?
It was so
You're
good.
very Hawaiian looking right now.
Oh, yeah. No, I got to slowly it's like depressurizing when you come up from a scuba tank. I just got to slowly
Get
I have
back.
flip-flops on, got my Hawaiian shirt on,
It's so weird because football, Big Ten Media Days, paying attention to that is wow, we are really in a different era. I'm doing there's a Trojans Coaches Club. I'm speaking at a little bit later today. So we're in it now.
Are you going to let them know that USC is in Los Angeles?
I will.
Along
just
with
like
UCLA.
Deshaun Foster did. It's funny that, yeah, he definitely brain farted and just froze up in his opening comments. But everything I heard after that, he was good. And I know Bruce Feldman knows him well. I was listening to Andy Staples, and they were all had positive things to say about. Yeah, he screwed that up, but everything else was good.
It's so on a human level, it's very understandable. He has stage fright. He's got the whole anxiety about public speaking, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, he does for real.
Yeah. And so nobody goes up there and sounds like that if they don't have huge anxiety.
Well, you could have just froze. He seems like he's good with reporters otherwise.
Totally fine in a scrum being asked questions, but that's very common for somebody who has public speaking anxiety.
Okay.
Giving a speech is different from answering questions.
Gotcha.
And so he's up there trying to remember what he was going to say, but he clearly didn't rehearse enough or practice enough. And so just empty sounds. And so on a human level, obviously you've got empathy for that.
Yes.
I mean, that sucks. And that's probably everyone's or a lot of people's worst nightmare is being up there. But on you're a 44-year-old man. Figure this out. I mean, I have public speaking anxiety. If I have to go stand up in front of people, I know the deal now. I'm going to be bad unless I practice. I write it down and then practice it a couple of times so I know how I'm the thing where he says we're in LA. That's a totally fine line if it's the beginning of a joke transition.
Yeah.
If it's well, we're in LA. We've got 340 days of sunshine every year, that whole thing.
Right. It's in the name of your school.
But he delivered it so poorly. He delivered that phrase so poorly that nobody laughed, and then he had nothing because he was so nervous after that it's I don't know what to do. But it's just there's, I think you got to know at that point, this isn't a strength of mine, so I need to shore it up. I need to do certain things to make it so that I can do this effectively.
Yeah.
Because by the time you're that age, I mean, I'm sure he's been having to give a speech at a wedding. Like, I'm sure there's stuff that he's had to do.
Yes.
And you don't just avoid it at a certain point. You get through it. You figure out how to do it. You figure out all this stuff. So I have sympathy. I have empathy. But I'm also, look, I've done it. I've figured it out. Why can't you just figure it out, dude?
And some coaches would just go up and say, all right, just fire away. Give me questions. And other ones, and I've heard some people talk about, they actually appreciated a shorter, like, opening statement because it gives you more time for questions,
and
where some coaches would go very long so they wouldn't have to answer a lot of questions.
And that's a really easy shortcut. If you want to do it, is just walk up there and say, hey, guys, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Our team is very excited to be in the Big Ten. I know we've got 15 minutes. A lot of you have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to open it up now. Anything you want to know about UCLA, fire away.
Yeah.
And I think everyone would love him for that. And that's a really simple way of doing it. But if you're going to do a prepared speech, like if you're going to do like a tight minute or a tight 2 minutes,
practice.
You got to know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
you got to have it like pretty locked in, especially if you are very nervous in front of people, which he is.
Yeah. I like doing that kind of stuff. I mean, you can get a little nervous, but I always feel comfortable just talking.
I feel fine if I've prepared a lot.
Yeah.
Like I've gotten to the point where like I can give a pretty good speech, but like I gotta rehearse the crap out of it.
That's funny. No, I like bullet points. I don't want to know, like, if you try to memorize words and stuff, it's not going to come off kind of clunky. But if I knew, like,
for me,
4 topics or something, I can just go on about
For me,
them.
it's all about memorizing transitions. It's memorizing the joke transitions.
Okay.
Like, giving a speech at a wedding, I got to have that, like, locked in, because otherwise I'm going to be like, hello.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I eat that stuff up. I've been the best man 3 times and just crushed
I've done it
best
twice.
man thing.
My first time I didn't rehearse enough, and it was second time I rehearsed like crazy, and it was awesome.
That's good.
So
Okay.
it's just, I think different things work for different people, but I guess my point is you got to figure out what works for you at that point, because you can't be up there and flubbing that stuff. Because the thing is, and people, kind of go back and forth on our message board about it. Is it important? Is it not important? Is it important? Is it not important? And it's important. Like, it's not the end all be all. It doesn't win or lose you any games, but it is important. Like, part of the job is public speaking. Part of the job is being the public face of the university, being energetic, being
for recruiting, for
outgoing,
everything,
all that kind of stuff.
Fan
and
engagement.
Like, this one has broken the sports bubble a little bit. Like, I've got people texting me who do not follow UCLA football, don't follow college football really at all, and are like, "What's going on? Like, what happened with Deshaun Foster? What is this?"
No, people were texting like, "Were you there?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't there." Were you in the room?
Like, and so you feel for him, like, on a human level. That sucks. Like, nobody wants to have that happen, but also get it together. Like, you can do that. Like, everybody can do this. Everybody can figure this out.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of get it together, we didn't get to do reviews last time. We got
a lot.
Do we have a lot of reviews?
We got a lot of reviews.
Okay.
All right. You ready for them?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. This is something we do on the Podcast of Champions for those of you listening.
Leave us a 5-star review. Sometimes we'll like bribe you with things,
but for now, we're just taking the 5 stars. All right. The first one from 15 days ago. This is from Pocahontas Smith. 5 stars. My go-to source for Big Ten football. As an alum of a noted Big Ten school, this podcast is where I turn to keep up with information on my school. From Niles Kinnick to Ethan Kaliakmanis, the 2 hosts of these shows are fountainheads of Big Ten information and definitely pronounced both of those names with no problem whatsoever. Unlike some, quote, football pods that talk obscure 80s sitcoms or Boer War tactics, this one never strays from the topic at hand, the 10 teams that make up the Big Ten Conference.
Nice.
There's a reason this podcast is available in more homes than the Big Ten Network.
Yeah. I think I got these up here. I can do one too.
Sure.
Stratonius, is that? They left a few days ago. RIP the Pack. Keep the sound clips for the Pac-12 teams and just play fart noises for all the other Big Ten teams. Death to the Big Ten. May it drown in the polluted waters of the Rust Belt.
Love it.
Well, there's a fan.
Yeah. 5-star review from Retired Insurance Man. 2 rated. I guess that's top rated. The new Podcast of Champions is the best Big 18 podcast out there. When Stanford, Cal, and Notre Dame join the group in 2 years, it will still be the best. That's because Ryan Abraham and David Woods have infinite knowledge of the Midwest and its hot dishes. They even know that the sound for the Ohio State team is the sound of a man scratching his nuts. Frank in Sacramento.
Thanks, Frank. We should have asked every guest like what their favorite hot dish is, so we could,
Yeah.
What's your go-to hot dish? Kevin left a 5-star review. Accidentally listened. This is right up our alley. I ended up accidentally downloading this show while mowing the lawn. I was stuck listening. I've been convinced that these guys must know a lot about soccer. I'll check back later.
5-star review from Bow Down to Washington, the Nebraska of Big Ten podcasts. Slightly chaotic, some flashes of brilliance, overall mediocre, 5 out of 5.
Nice. 5-star from Shelly Chalker, from Pack to Big. Great transition. First listen to the boys during the original USC-UCLA Big Ten announcement. Like the show and glad they came along to the big B1G. They will find a home here. Very excited to hear them during the season. Thanks, Shelly.
This is a 5-star from AFC 31, a very sad 5-star. A fond farewell. Gentlemen, unfortunately my time with you has come to an end. I'm not sure what I'll miss most. Will it be the self-loathing for having to agree with David's takes about the Herm Edwards-Michael Crow debacle? Or will it be Ryan's fumbling as the host in a storage facility studio with a fire alarm problem? I don't know. I wish you both well, and I hope you have enormous success. I hope for nothing but painful last-minute or blowout losses for your football programs. Keep it mediocre for the Big Ten folks.
Oh. Well, that's a sad one. Yeah, we're going to have some Pac-12 fans that did not didn't make the
They didn't make the cut.
Yeah, the lifeboat.
Yeah, they got into a different boat.
They're floating around.
Arizona State made it into a different boat.
It's a different boat. Yeah. This is the last one's 5-star from Mari. This one hurts. The Pac-12's death didn't feel real until the podcast of champions fully fell to the dark side, switching to become a Big Ten podcast. Still love the banter that Ryan and David bring and look forward to all sorts of topics covered, from U.S. war generals, Disney princesses, and the occasional mention of college football. May your wonderful mediocrity live on for many years to come.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
That's really nice. There were some really good reviews there. Thank you very much.
Yes, you guys are all awesome people, and we love you very much.
So much. I did want to talk about what I mentioned, with David Biddle, as far as, so Ross Dellinger's done an amazing job covering this. I don't know if you've been able to talk to people at UCLA. I think when this was initially reported, they had only talked about, I think, 5 sports. It was like football, basketball, baseball, softball, and like women's volleyball.
Yep.
And the baseball one was like the biggest percentage increase, 11.7 to I think 35 scholarships. And I know, USC's got the most national championships of any baseball team, but they haven't won since '98. It's difficult for partial scholarships at an expensive private school. Whatever, you can use excuses, but to fund a big roster, a lot of those players are paying their own way to school, and so a lot of them were assuming, okay, well, USC is going to have 35 baseball scholarships now, and that's definitely not going to be the case, and it might not even be close to that from the people I'm talking to. I think they're going to have to make some tough decisions, but there's the Title IX aspect of you still have to keep, scholarship numbers. I believe it's like on par with what your admission is, or the student body enrollment is. So if it's like 50-50 men, women, you can't have 75% of your scholarships going to men. And USC doesn't have a softball team, so there's nothing there. They could add a bunch of track scholarships, but every scholarship is costing 6 figures, and you're talking millions and millions of dollars for these athletic departments that are already trying with no new revenue streams, right?
And in fact, revenue is going to go down because
of revenue sharing.
Profit is going to go down because of revenue sharing.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what happens. You do have to balance men's and women's sports. Are you going to get rid of some? I don't know. Are you going to just keep running your baseball team with like 15 scholarships and then Mississippi State's going to have 35 scholarships? And how are you going to do? Is it going to be regional? Are there or West Coast, volleyball? Is it just going to be the volleyball powers? They'll fund their volleyball team, and the programs that that don't do very well, they're going to stop funding it. I don't know how this is going to all work out. But there's not enough money, I don't think, in any athletic department in the country I think Ross reported there were 790 potential new scholarships. Now, some of that's like fencing and equestrian and stuff. Like the schools don't have all these sports, but UCLA, a lot of sports. USC, a lot of sports. Ohio State, a lot of sports. If you expanded it all, I don't know if any of those departments could afford to put that many scholarships in. And I think the one potential thing could be the university, because it's basically you're paying yourself, right? It's accounting, because you're like, well, you're going to school at USC. You run USC, so it doesn't really cost you money, but it does. It does the way you're accounting it. Does the university pay for it, or I don't know how this would work?
No. So the problem is, you're taking an existing structure that has, however, like nicely we might talk about it. Right now, the baseball team makes some money for the university, not because of ticket sales, but because a huge percentage of the team is paying money to the university to be at the university.
That's a good point too. Yeah,
you can't take that money away and then also give scholarships. My argument about scholarships the longest time is it is fake. Like it's not. This isn't real money. It's
right.
It's all inflated.
You're not writing a check.
It's drastically inflated. Like USC, it doesn't cost to attend $100,000.
Right.
It's whatever, $10,000 or whatever it is. But you're taking away revenue. So you're taking, and I think this would qualify as university revenue. So it does get into a bigger bucket than athletic department revenue, but it's still bottom line for the university. Baseball goes from, is it a 35-person roster most of the time, or 33 people?
I think it's 30. I think it's around that, and they would only have 11.7
and that's
scholarships.
21 people, like in total, 21 full tuitions that are going to go away if they try to fill it out with scholarships.
Yeah,
that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of athletic departments that are budget conscious. I think it'll be a deal breaker for basically everybody. I don't think anyone is trying to take on, and it's not just baseball. They've done it. I think it's a few different sports that have or a lot of different sports that have added basically full roster scholarships. There's no way most athletic departments are going to be able to do that. I think you're going to have to get into private funding to make it happen, and then you're just talking about a different version of NIL. There's
Ross,
like UCLA, for example. There is absolutely, categorically no flipping way that they're going to be able to do that in baseball or many of these minor sports. I don't even know if they're going to be able to go up to 105 in football.
We could talk about the football in a second, but yes, I don't think you need 105 scholarships.
No, and that's the other thing.
There's like fourth-string guys are on scholarship. Like they're just going to transfer out anyway and go play somewhere.
You don't need 85. You need 75. And as USC showed us during their many decades under sanctions. And the ramifications felt for many, many years after that.
Yeah.
But you don't need, and basketball doesn't need 15. Basketball doesn't need 13. Basketball needs 11.
But I think you assume everyone's going to be on scholarship. There's still going to be walk-ons, but the roster limit for football will be, you can't have like 120 guys, but you'll have 105.
Yeah, it's going to drop by 15, which is
But that 105th guy is probably not going to be on scholarship, because you don't need him to be like.
No, but the fact that they're not going to have as many walk-ons is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I think for some programs that's going to be more of an issue than, and the thing is, it gives you flexibility on those years where you get 90 guys. Like, okay, 90's fine. We can make that work. But it's hard to imagine even Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia wanting to go to 105. It's a lot of revenue you're taking away from your university. And I think we're going to learn pretty quickly which universities in the country does the tail wag the dog and which ones are like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Your little athletic department isn't going to be robbing, the chancellor or the president of his budget. That's not going to happen.
So Ross put out this chart, and he said in his tweet like 790 new scholarships, but in the chart it looks like 750 or something. But it was like a little over 500 old limits of scholarships, and now it's going to be over 1,200, almost 1,300. Like women's tumbling. So like Utah, right? They have a big, they had 14 scholarships before. They're going to have 55 now.
Yeah.
This is, just to let everyone know, this is roster limit. So what they're trying to do is avoid being sued for scholarship limitations. So you can't just say it's a scholarship number. They're just saying, give out as many scholarships as you want, but your roster can only be this big.
Well, so this is the problem: is they do this, and they're doing it to cover their own ass, which we all recognize. We all understand that. Like, this is to make sure that they don't look like anti-competitive and all that kind of shit. The problem is, in any good sport, any structured sport, there's official collusion where you put limitations on these things. But because the NCAA is such a weak organization, because it's gotten so little governmental buy-in, because it feels like it's not going to be able to enforce anything anymore, there's going to be none of that. And so at the conference level, maybe there'll be some unofficial collusion, or maybe they figure out some ways to get around this so that they can put limitations on it. But you're going to still have arms race problems.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Nobody's going to agree like, oh, okay, right. So fencing can go up to 24 from 4.5. Well, let's just limit it at 6. Nobody's going to do that because maybe, Stanford's got a great fencing program this year. As they probably do, because they're probably the only ones who actually do fencing. And so they're like, you know what? We want to go up to 10. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
And then they won't know. And then they go up to 10, and then they're like, and then, Rice is over here, and they're like, we want to do fencing too. And we're going to go up to 12. And it just gets crazy then again. And it'll have, all these things will have negative effects in some probably very real ways where sports are going to get cut.
I'm curious how it goes. I mean, adding 41 tumbling spots for track, men's track is adding 32 and a half.
Water polo is going
lacrosse 30, 35 for women. Like this is some crazy numbers.
Yeah. Women's rugby is going up by 53. It's just,
oh wow, that's great. Yeah, from 12 to 65.
It's great. I mean, it's great that there will potentially be more opportunity, but that's not the way this is going to work. And another big reason for it is, massive inflation in tuition costs at every university.
Oh yeah.
I mean, these
all cost. This
is all
now.
Part of the same problem.
Yeah.
Which is inflationary greed. But basically, this is untenable in modern college athletics. 40 years ago, they probably could have done this easily. Now, there's no way. Things cost too much money. Universities get too much money from all these guys not being on, or all these men and women not being on scholarship. And now if you put them on scholarship, that's not going to work.
And I know, I mean, we're kind of going on about this, but there's a lot of tough decisions are going to be made. And it'll be interesting to see, does a region of the country start doing this and other regions don't. And I don't know, USC has won the beach volleyball national championship for 4 straight years. I've had Dane Blanton, the head coach, on a couple times. He's a former Olympian himself. He has 6 scholarships, and you have 10 people playing. There are 5 pairs, so that's 10 people. So you have to, move those around and give partial scholarships. That's going up to 19 because your roster is 19. He could have that many. I don't think he's going to get that many scholarships, but they've won 4 championships, so it's you probably want to fund that more. But maybe they go to 8 or 9 or something. But Florida State goes all 19, and they've been really good, but they haven't been able to get over the hump and beat the West Coast teams. Maybe they do now because they have all these scholarships. I'm curious to see how this all works, and if you put a lot of money into the sports you're good at and maybe ignore the ones you're not. I don't know, dude. I mean, it's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else we want to get to? We have some questions.
We got so many friggin' questions.
Man.
Oh,
wait. Where did we start? Do you want to go? You want to start newest?
Hang on.
I think we got Paul. We get newest, and then when we run out of steam, we just stop.
I think Steve Langsford was the last one. Is that right? Oxnard Steve?
Oh, that's Foster's Freeze. Oh.
No, 10 stars for the new Podcast of Champions, or is that not? Did we do that one already?
Oh, God, that's way back when.
That's from Saturday, July 13th. When did we last do a show?
That we did questions? I don't know. Do we need to do all these?
We got to do some questions,
okay.
man. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get into it.
So you want to start with John?
No, I'm doing Oxnard Steve.
Okay.
What is with you?
I thought that was we already did that one. All right, go ahead.
I don't think we did.
All right.
I don't know. Did we?
I don't know. It's Saturday morning, and I'm not sure what's going on.
What time? When did we last record a show?
Just do this.
Give me a date.
I don't know.
Why don't you know things? Hang on. I'm going to look it up. We're going to figure this out. You ready? I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
I'm looking it up. This is great radio. 11 days ago. So we definitely did do this one. Probably. Who knows?
No, we didn't do questions. That was the problem.
We didn't do questions last time? I thought we did questions. No, we didn't do reviews last time.
Okay.
We did questions.
All right, good.
God, honestly, what's with you? All right, I'm going to find us a question to start with. All right, I think we're going to do Maurice.
Yeah, Maurice looks like a good place to start.
Suggestion. Dear Ryan and David, I've been a big fan of your podcast for a long time. I was wondering if you might consider setting aside 10 minutes of every podcast during the season to run down how all the Pac-12 teams in the diaspora are doing. Thanks. Maurice, USC 8395, Oregon 01. Yeah, I think our plan is to do at least an end of show power rankings of the old Pac-12. Just run them all together during the season. That was one of our things. So we'll do that. We can probably commit to that for like a 2-minute bit at the end.
Yeah, we could do that. Let's see. Where was that? There was some weird one.
I'll do the next one since you're still looking.
Okay.
All right. This is from Frank in Sacramento. Forward bottom feeder question. Now that you're reviewing and rating the Big 18, what is the most left-handed compliment you can make to a team? 1, if they catch a few breaks, they will be bowl eligible. Or 2, their defense wasn't very good last year, but they have everybody back. I think number 1 is more backhanded.
Yeah, if they get a few breaks, you could be bowl eligible because it's not like that great to be bowl eligible and stuff.
Right. And a defense not being very good but getting everyone back actually can have a meaningful impact on a defense.
Yeah. He also said, wow, that Rutgers guy was great. Get Brian Doan back on the show at least once a month. I could listen to him talk football all day long. He was really great.
Love it.
Thanks for that.
This is another one from Oxnard Steve. Illinois Rutgers follow-up. Ryan and David. Thanks for having the Illinois and Rutgers experts on the podcast of champions. Even with all the new information, I am still very confused. So what exactly is a Fighting Illini? I think I know who are fighting the Illini. It is the players on the opposing teams, and those teams are doing a damn good job of beating up on the Illini of Illinois. Funny side story, my friend brought his 12-year-old daughter to the 2008 Rose Bowl game, and on our way back to the car, she honestly asked, Dad, why would people from Illinois come all the way out here to see their team lose? And what is a Rutgers? I think it is something you yell out when you smash your thumb with a hammer, and you don't want your kids to hear you say a bad word. Or maybe what you say under your breath when your team gets scored on or loses another game. And since the Scarlet O'Haras lose a lot, and as a Trojan, frankly, I don't give a damn, maybe their fan base yelled Rutgers so frequently they decided to just name the university Rutgers. Keep up the great work. I am looking forward to hearing more Midwestern, East Coast insights.
Thanks, Steve. It's funny. The Reign of Troy folks, they do a good USC podcast, but they've done like a Big 10 minutes segment every show, and they'll go deep dives into one program, and they talk about like how the mascot came about and all that. So I'm sure they talked about the Illini one. I don't know. I mean, it's an Indian tribe, but I think
among many other things, Illini is also just the thing you call somebody from Illinois, which is the case for Nebraska. It's the case for Indiana. It might be the case for Iowa. What my point is that the Big Ten teams figure something out and be original. Stop just naming your university like sports teams after just like a random, like this is the term for anybody in the state. Stop doing that. It's really annoying. And it also makes it hard for us to do sound effects.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be somebody with an Iowa accent saying, I'm a Hawkeye. Is that an Iowa accent? Who knows? Has anyone ever heard an Iowa accent? That's a question for you.
Yeah. I would say, like I think they did Purdue recently, and Purdue is actually one of the original names. A lot of these schools have changed names. Like
Boilermakers is cool as hell.
And Boilermakers was like from a sports writer, which I love how like nicknames come up. I think the Trojans, it was like that stuff too, but they were calling from what the podcast said, Michael Castillo was talking about it. They were like these burly, corn-fed guys, and they were like a bunch of Boilermakers or something. And then it just stuck.
No, they actually had a train boiler on campus back in the early 1900s.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah, I already did this too. I did it for all my stupid primers. No, they're just making shit up. Boilermakers is actually based on like they were engineers, like it's an engineering school. So it was like train engines.
You and Michael could get on this on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't need to get into it. I know.
All right.
I've done the work.
You guys read different Wikipedia pages.
The homework.
Okay.
I didn't just read Wikipedia. I went to the university websites to figure this shit out, man. I was
Matthew,
serious.
Matthew from Mountain View, the heart of ACC country, wrote in, "You forgot something. Hello, gents. In your rush to escape the Pac-12 beat, you failed to address at all the massive news that took place during your hiatus, the passing of Bill Walton. Some people noted the coincidence that he died the day after the last Pac-12 sporting event, and perhaps he couldn't live in a world without the Conference of Champions. However, I would suggest the possibility of a more insidious case. You guys, you killed the Pac-12 coverage, then Bill Walton passed away. Coincidence? I think not. Hope you can live with yourselves for the harm you have brought to society. For shame." 5 stars from Matthew.
Very possible. We got to still have Matthew around to run our survivor pool.
Yes.
But
needs to do that.
he is primarily a Stanford fan.
He's a Stanford fan.
But there's
ACC.
there's a UCLA connection. So
Did he do Masters or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. So we're gonna have to count on him really leaning into being a UCLA person.
He's very smart.
Yeah. This is from Perk, who wrote an email.
Wow.
I didn't know Perk could write emails. I thought it was all voicemails.
Did you change the voicemail over to this?
I don't know what that means.
Like-
It's the same number.
No, but we need to get notifications.
No, and here's the problem. I actually had to send a text message to myself from that phone number because Google was going to do away with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But-
But anyway, I don't know how to do that, so switch it to this email address because it's associated with the other email address. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll figure that out.
You
at
got to
some
figure
point.
that out.
No, I don't. I think that's more of a you thing. Big Ten advice and Ohio State coverage. Hello, Riley and Doug. Great to see this become a Big Ten podcast. Looking forward to your rants being directed at a team I actually root for once. In the first episode, Dave asked what fan bases he can make fun of that no one cares about. They are exactly who you'd think: Nebraska, Rutgers, and Maryland. Scott Frost wanted to leave the Big Ten over their initial COVID season cancellation. No one was interested in keeping them from leaving. No real nuance with Maryland and Rutgers. We don't know why we got them in the first place or why they're still here. On a brighter note, I'm sure the listeners from Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, etc. will be much more receptive to Dave's politics than the West Coast. Should you guys not be able to schedule someone to cover the Ohio State preview, I'm happy to help. I'm not at the practices, but then again, I thought mediocre quality is what this show is all about. Have a great weekend, Perk.
Thanks, Perk. We got an expert, but we appreciate your offer.
We do.
Yeah. Thanks for that. We'll get some direct message stuff. Unburdened by what has been.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Alex in San Francisco. Again, the heart of ACC country. Hello, champions. Dave, what brought you the greatest sense of relief between Chip Kelly finally mercifully stepping down and Joe Biden finally mercifully stepping down? And what advice do you have for someone picking up a stakes job off cycle with a lot of pressure to succeed after watching 5 months of Foster?
Chip Kelly leaving definitely brought me a greater sense of relief. It had been longer. It had been a longer time spent with Chip Kelly. Much of it very, very, very bad for me personally.
Gotcha.
So Chip Kelly leaving, we're big fans. As for what advice do I have for somebody picking up a high stake job off cycle with a lot of pressure to succeed after watching 5 months of Foster? You got to go with your strengths. You got to mitigate your weaknesses. You got to not flub your public speaking opportunities. You gotta hit the ground running. And I think when you have a little bit less time before, that other people, if you take it in a normal time, you might have more time. But with less time, there's less expectations. So I think there's some advantages with having less time. But you still have to, there's still going to be, where the rubber meets the road, where you gotta, perform.
I just sent a transfer request while you're doing this. So
That was great. That was great.
Because you couldn't figure it out.
But Joe Biden, his brain not working right.
Doesn't seem like it.
So he did the in the fullness of time he did the right thing. Now probably, with his brain being what it is, probably should have resigned the most important position in the world. Isn't this insane?
Dave hates all presidents, and I assume presidential candidates.
Yeah, all of them. Isn't it insane? Like, can we all just take a step back and realize that this is insane? Like, we're presented with, like, for the longest time this cycle, we were presented with an actually insane choice. Like, this 78-year-old with, senility, or that 82-year-old with senility. This is the choice you have for the most powerful position in the world. They will decide where the bombs drop.
Nice.
These ancient mariners whose brains don't work anymore.
Yeah.
Please for to enjoy.
All right, let's move on to Steve. We have like college sports craziness going on, political craziness going on, but we're going to talk more about the college sports craziness and maybe Disney princesses. Steve Foster's freeze. Now that was an excruciating 2 minutes. UCLA head coach Deshaun Foster standing silent for most of his opening statement at Big Ten Media Days. It was truly excruciating for me. I'm not so certain that Coach Foster felt the same way. I got the distinct impression that he was, quote, excited to be there. He must have used that word 24 times in his presser. After each of his many awkwardly long pauses, I thought he might blurt out something along the lines of, "We beat USC." What, too soon? And then he did reference USC, kind of, quote, "You might know me by my famous big brother. We come from the same town." Truly cringeworthy. And I'm a Trojan. The Tommy Trojan inside me so wanted to cheer Coach Foster's freeze, but I could not because of the bigger picture. I want all of the former Pac-12 programs to not just roll into the Big Ten, but to steamroll through the new conference's foes. But alas, I am now even less confident. I now have even less confidence in the Bruins' chances. Fight on and thaw out, Oxnard Steve.
Yeah, I mean, any take you have on it, I think, is fair. You can extrapolate from it and say it reflects a lack of preparation. It reflects, whatever, work ethic. Or you can say
UCLA education. I don't know what we're going to say.
Stop it. Or you can say it's no big deal, and it won't really reflect at all on the field. I think it's all fair. And I think that's the problem with flubbing a major public opportunity like that is you open yourself up to a lot of criticism, and it's fair. You can't mess that stuff up. It's their own goals, and that doesn't need to be a win. Big Ten Media Days does not need to be a win for your program, but you can't go up there and lose it. And that's what they did, and that's crazy because it's not a game. But they came out of it somehow, and this so rarely happens, but came out of it a negative story from Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about this before. I don't think Media Days is in and of itself an event to be covered. Like, I don't think it matters in that way. I think it's just an opportunity to talk to all of these people. But like the way we cover it is like it's this event. But he made it so that like that media availability ended up being an event. Like this is a thing. And that's not good. So, I think all that's fair. This is from Doug from San Francisco. Question for the show. Hi, guys. I'm sure most people already know this, but can you explain how the number ratings of players work? For example, how should I think about an incoming freshman with an 80 rating versus a junior transfer with a 90 rating and 20-plus starts? I assume the junior would be a better player or contributor, but then why do they have the same number? Is it more about potential? Thanks, Doug from San Francisco.
He said the incoming freshman was a 90 also. Sorry. 90 rating. You said 80. That's okay.
Yeah. 90 so both 90 ratings.
Yes.
So Doug, great question. I think trying to go apples to apples on transfers versus high school recruits is probably fraught with problems.
Yes.
I think what you can generally extrapolate, but this isn't even true in my experience, but I think maybe if you did a long-term statistical analysis, is the transfer ratings are probably slightly more accurate because they're based on actual college performance and actual college statistics. but
high school ones like a lot of potential.
High school ones, I mean, they're still very good. I mean,
Yeah.
as we've talked about in the past, star ratings do work, but it's, I think, a little bit more fraught with uncertainty. You know, so much depends on how a guy matures from 17 to 21, and not just physically, but also like, are they going to take it seriously? Are they going to commit to the program? Are they going, all that kind of crap. A transfer, you don't have as many issues because you've seen them perform. They've gone through a college program already. Like, those maturation problems have already more or less been taken care of. So I think it's just a framework for understanding, this guy's pretty good, this guy's not so good, is the rating system. I think doing comparisons between the two are fraught. But it's just, I think the star ratings and those number ratings are easy for people to understand, like as a relative judgment against other transfers or other high school. If there was a better system, I'm sure it would be great, but I think it's just to make it easy for everyone to understand, and also to make it so that we can create recruiting rankings that include both.
Yeah, it was hard because I think transfers just became a huge part. Like, you could have a pretty mediocre high school class, but you really improved your roster because you had, like Colorado didn't do much on the recruiting trail, but brought in a shit ton of transfers. So they needed some way to kind of quantify that. And you're trying to, it's, it's not quite apples and oranges, but it's not apples to apples either. So they're trying to make it as close as possible. But like, I agree with David. I think the ones you get from the transfers, there's a little more thought behind it because you've actually seen them play in a lot of cases. And some transfers, and then how do you even, there's different levels of transfers too, where if you get a fifth-year senior or COVID sixth-year senior that's coming in for 1 year to play quarterback, or like, you kind of know what you got. If you're Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon, like, you have a pretty good idea what's going on. Sometimes it's a transfer, like a 5-star, rush end that came in and didn't play that much, but he was still this 5-star guy, but he was behind a bunch of good players, decided he wants to go get playing time. So a lot of that's still based on the recruiting rankings. He hasn't done much in college, but he's a 5-star, like, as of a year ago. So it's even hard to compare transfers in some cases, where some are like seasoned vets that played a lot of college, and other ones are just like, still a lot of it's based on that potential you saw from high school.
Right.
One last one, Paul Webfoot, about coach longevity. Hello, champions. Hopefully this is the right email. It is. I am so glad to have my favorite conference-specific podcast back. My feed had a David Woods-shaped hole in it for far too long. I want to talk about the expected length of coaching tenures for the 4 Pac-12 transplants into the Big 18. Jed Fish he's talking about, has been associated with the Florida job from the first day he was hired at Washington. Foster walks into a tough rebuild with no head coaching experience. Feinbaum has decided USC needs to fire Riley for Deion Sanders, and then please God, yes. And Lanning will continue to be mentioned for every SEC opening, regardless of how green the grass is at Oregon. So how many of the 4 of those will still be in their coaching in the current jobs at the current school in 2, 3, and 5 years? Bonus points if you want to predict who leaves and in what order. Keep doing what it is y'all do. Paul/Webfoot.
All right. So let's start with Jed Fish. Odds he's there in 2 years. 50-50.
Yeah, I might go.
And then drastically down from there. I don't know Billy Napier's situation at Florida that well, but I mean, Fish has been rumored to want to get to Florida for a long time.
Yeah.
So 50-50 at best at 2 years, and then I think it drops precipitously from there.
Yeah.
Foster,
I think 2 years is much higher because I don't
2
think
years for sure.
But 3 and 5 could be significantly lower.
I mean, I would put it right now at 90% through 2. A little bit better than 50-50 for 3, and then I don't know, 20% for 5.
Yeah, I would go with something like that. I mean, if he's still there after 5 years, it's
that's
really
not.
good.
I mean, that is a reflection on him, but it's not entirely. He has a very narrow path to success at UCLA. They're behind the 8 ball with a lot of stuff.
But if he's there that long, he's doing some really good things.
It's sort of like that like the longevity things where like if you make it to 70, your odds of getting to 80 are huge, and if you make it to 80, your odds of getting to 90 are like 50-50. Like you've got a great chance. It's like that. If he gets to 4, I'll feel great about his chances of getting to 5 and beyond. I think the breakthrough has to happen in year 2 or 3 for him to have success.
Yeah, I would agree.
USC with Riley, I would say 50-50 at best 2 years, and then dropping precipitously from there.
So I would go higher.
Because you're fully in the bag.
No, I think we've seen issues for sure, but he also has this massive contract, and the athletic department's going to be strapped for cash with all this stuff. I don't know if they wanted to get rid of Riley. I don't think this would. If he leaves, it's going to be really hard to be USC's decision, because of that contract. So I think that's why I would put it higher. It would have to be he does well and like goes to the NFL.
We kind of agree he kind of sucks, right? No?
He's 40. He's done some things that are like, what? But he still does stuff really well, like run an offense and do all that. To me, it's going to be a lot about, well, did you sort of put your defensive philosophies behind, and now you're going to let D'Anton Lynn kind of run things? I don't think it's like a Feinbaum thing where it's over, but some of the recruiting strategies, it's been kind of questionable. But even if USC wasn't happy with him, like 3 years from now, like they're struggling in the Big Ten, I think it'll be very hard for USC to get rid of him because he's got this massive contract.
Well, and my thing with Lincoln Riley and USC generally, and like maybe this is just me from an outsider perspective, and obviously there's a lot of internal stuff, but what Phil Knight is doing for Oregon is impressive, and yada yada yada. $20 million a year or whatever it is. USC has like, I don't know how many friggin' billionaires in the alumni base. Like do some glad handing, Lincoln. Like your job is to build a program, and whatever like newfangled ideas you have about like locker room, keeping things balanced in the locker room. We don't want the locker room to blow up. Yeah. And that'll happen sometimes. But you know what else happens if you spend a lot of money on a roster? You get better players.
Yeah.
And if you get better players, you know what you do? More often than not, you win more games. Do your job. And your job is to acquire the best talent and then coach them and win games. And it just seems like some of these guys, and, we joked when Lincoln Riley was hired, and I made some jokes about, like, the Chip Kelly analogy there. And, like, over time, like, I don't think he's Chip Kelly by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think he is that negligent in other aspects of the program. But just, again, from an outsider, he's not that way. Like, these ideas that, like, oh, well, we don't want to spend too much money because we don't want, the locker room to be out of balance and all that kind of stuff. Bullshit. That's just bullshit. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, they're not having these problems, and they're spending a lot of money.
Yeah, I think USC's NIL was way, way far behind, and I think they've actually caught up. And the people we're talking to, it seems like they've raised a bunch of money, but it's not just here's your pile of money. It's like how efficiently can you spend it? How they have 3 collectives. It's kind of clunky. I think coaches are reluctant to give up power where now boosters have power, and this new House ruling, they're trying to, move. So I think USC's not done a really good job. And I think part of it's Riley, part of it's collective. I think there's a lot of stuff together. They're not been on the same page when it comes to, we're offering kids this money to come to school.
And it's proof in the pudding. I mean, right now, the 25th best class in the country, like USC should never be there.
No.
Like never that low. And it's just, what the hell? Like, and you say NIL is getting sort of figured out, but like, if it's getting sort of figured out and they're still recruiting like this, that makes me think they're dead in the water. Like if they've got the money and they're the 25th best class, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, no, they're still working towards all that stuff, which is it's concerning for USC fans. Like, they should have been the growing pains shouldn't have been this, difficult, but they have been for sure.
And then the last one was Danning. This one, I'm fully Danning-pilled. I think he could be there forever. I mean, it's a great job right now. You can get players from
unlimited
anywhere.
funds. Yeah.
You're going to recruit at a top 5 level in perpetuity. Kirby Smart's not going anywhere, so you're not going back to Georgia. Kalen DeBoer just got hired at Alabama, so you're not going to Alabama. So if you're Dan Lanning, like, what's going to come open in the next 5 years? Maybe LSU? Maybe?
Yeah, like Florida, LSU.
Are any of those jobs
Texas
right
A&M.
now? Are any of those jobs right now better than Oregon?
I don't think those are. What, like if it's like Texas?
But Steve Sarkisian's got them in the playoff last year. Like he's not going anywhere.
I'm trying to
for a
think
while.
of where you'd want to go, like Ohio State. Like
It would have to be something. I guess my point is, it would have to be something crazy happening and opening something up. Because right now, I think
it's weird. Those college football, nothing crazy happens.
But the jobs you would leave Oregon for are Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, like I think people. Oregon right now, maybe Phil Knight, he's going to die at some point, but he's still alive. And, I mean, he's got friggin' kids that'll also probably fund Oregon football. But I guess, what do you leave Oregon for?
Yeah. The only thing I could think of is, so I haven't dug into this House ruling. And yeah, I think he's going to stay there a while. Like, I think he's made it pretty clear. Once next academic year, 2025, 2026, they are trying to put in stipulations so you can't just have a collective. They're trying to like phase out the collectives. So you can't just have a collective say, here's $1 million, come play for Oregon or come play for Alabama or whatever it is. They want it to be part of this budget, which is set. And it's going to be, somewhere between $21 and $23 million next year, and it'll go up a little bit every year. So if that limits what Phil Knight can spend on players, like you're going to be in a salary cap with, and if someone does get an NIL deal, it can't just be, here's $1 million to come play. You'd have to do work. You'd have to be on commercials. You have whatever it would be. What they're saying is like there'd be outside, there's ways to monitor this. So if Oregon can't just buy as many players as they want anymore, and they have to do it within a budget that other schools are following as well, maybe some of the appeal is some of the shine is off of that.
Well, so there's two things.
Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And that might take away some of the competitive advantage they have right now. But the thing is, and this is the thing to understand about Oregon, I mean, it's been close to 20 years of them climbing the world of college football. And I think right now Oregon's brand in college football is hard to beat. I mean, they're a top 5 brand. I think, when you're an elite recruit nationally, even before money starts getting talked about, you're like, oh yeah, Oregon's one to look at. And the thing is with Dan Lanning, and again, this is me being Danning-pilled, Landanning. Sorry, my mistake.
Yes.
He's an SEC recruiter, and that's a priority for that staff. They recruit like crazy on top of, obviously having good NIL. So I don't know. I mean, I think rules and regulations will level the playing field to some extent. First, I don't buy that it's going to happen, but second,
seems like it'd be hard to regulate,
yeah,
but that's what they're trying to do.
But if it does,
which would take the part of the advantage away.
But I think still, even in a competitive environment, you can expect Oregon to probably be a top 15 recruiting power.
Yes.
And if they're top 15 in perpetuity and it's a level playing field where nobody's going to be able to do a competitive thing, I think you end up at the same point, which is there's 5 or 6 jobs you might leave for, but when are they going to come open? So yeah. I guess from a confidence standpoint, I think Landanning is the one I feel most confident being there in 5 years.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. It will be. I think they're trying to take away, like Texas A&M, Tennessee, what some of these schools are doing with the massive bags for players. Oregon. And I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. You try to regulate something away, there's always unintended consequences. But that's sort of like what the plan is to be. Now, maybe Oregon, if so they do that, and you can't just drop bags for all these players, and they're not getting $1 million each. they could like have a amazing athletic department where they do fund all of the scholarships and where other athletic programs can't. But I think for football, there's going to be limitations of what you could really do. But yeah, we'll see. So much is changing in college football. It's absolutely insane, and college athletics in general. All right, is that all we got?
That is all we have, and I have completed the number transfer request, Ryan. So now our transfer is complete.
Yay.
We each did one half of that job.
I think I did it before you did, but that's okay.
That's so not true. I did it. It's transferred. I set up the account. It's all done.
Perfect.
You put the request in. I fulfilled the request.
Okay.
It was a handshake.
So that you just clicked on the link, the email that I had.
No, I had to sign up for a Google Voice account for our new thing.
Oh, very nice.
And then I had to go in and find where I could accept it. It took 45 seconds.
There you go. Nice job. All right.
Yeah.
So if you do want to send us a text or voicemail, we should be able to get it easier now. 424-532-0678, Twitter at B1G Podcast, and of course on the Apple Podcasting app. Leave us a 5-star review. We love those. You can do it on Spotify too, a 5-star rating. I don't believe they do reviews yet. And there's no more Google Podcasts. That went away. So I don't know. I used to use Google Podcasts when I had an Android phone, but I don't have one anymore. Now I use Apple Podcasts. We all went hour and 45 minutes on a Saturday morning.
Google's bad.
Google's bad?
Yeah.
I use it all the time.
Have you Googled anything recently?
No.
Like,
well, I mean, I'm sure I have Google.
Have you searched the thing on like your desktop?
Yeah.
Or like on a computer?
Uh-huh.
And the AI thing that pops up?
Oh, yeah, I don't like that.
What the fuck?
I think Facebook and everyone's pushing the AI stuff. Like, there's like a search.
I was
for
reading
Facebook.
something about it, and like a bunch of these companies invested a ton in AI, and then it's turning out that AI is basically just bullshit, and it's like the accuracy level is so bad that they're like cutting resources to AI. But that doesn't stop them from just inundating us with just this horse shit constantly. Like I have to, and when you search something now, like it's so slow because it has to generate that text before you can actually search. And the thing is, Google search already had gotten terrible. Like searching for things on Google was already a disaster, like a minefield of just spam and bullshit because I was reading a story. Their new head of search the last few years, you know what he prioritizes? The number of searches you make. Well, what's the inherent problem there? If you're prioritizing the number of searches, do you want the first search to yield the proper result?
No, you want to have to do another search.
You want to have to do another search.
Change the
So
wording.
now, when you're trying to search something, you have to append either Wiki or Reddit to it to actually get a result that you want. And it's just basically going to a different website. We need to return to the old internet where you just went to discrete websites. There was no searching. You just had to discover it on your own because Google has ruined itself. And all the other search engines, people like to talk about Bing or whatever, or these independent ones. And I'm like, I'm not learning a new thing now. I've already got this thing. I'm just going to go to fewer internet things. Like I just won't be on the internet, and that's fine too. But
it's your job.
Google sucks. They're fucking terrible. Or horrible company. You know, their motto was "Don't be evil." Just an evil company.
Did they change that?
I don't know,
They're
but
like,
they suck so bad. Worst company.
Well, good. I don't think they're going to sponsor us anytime soon.
Well, and then they delete their podcasting app that you so dearly loved. Does anybody use other podcasting apps? Why? What's the
people
point?
use Spotify.
No, but why?
I've had people ask about YouTube.
Why?
I don't know. People, if you have Spotify,
You've got the stupid iPhone. It's got the little purple.
But a lot of
thing
people
that
don't
says
have
podcasts. No, they do.
a lot of people don't.
Why do you people have Google Androids? Like, what's the deal there?
like the phone? Like the camera's always better. Like
No, but like when you text somebody, you don't get to do iMessage. You got to do the
I know
stupid
that's the
green
only
bubbles.
thing that's good. Yeah, like the blue bubbles.
My sister has so we've got a sibling group chat, me and my 4 siblings, and 4 of us have iPhones, but my sister has and not just like an Android, but like some garbage Android, and like when she texts, Like it disrupts the entire thing because it's like,
Oh yeah, you can't send photos.
yo, the photos end up like super small.
Yeah,
or
videos
I
are
can't
terrible.
send her anything. Yeah, I'll get like videos for ants. And she, but also like it'll just randomly, because those are coming in as texts, and I'm sending. I'm mostly on iMessage. Sometimes I just won't get things, or they'll all come out of order, or they'll come in like some.
They don't play well. They need to play well together.
Yeah,
but like,
I mean it's
but
Apple's.
Apple does
It's
that
Apple's fault.
because
Don't
they
get me
want
wrong.
they want to make it so you have to join.
But
them.
they're better at capitalism than Google is. They've understood if we do a closed system and we make it super popular, everyone else has to adapt to us.
Yeah.
Which means they increase their market share. I would like Google to discontinue their phones so everyone can be on
But
iMessage.
Samsung. There's a lot of Android phones. That's more of an open.
Yeah, but it goes back to Microsoft. This whole idea of like PCs that anyone can create a new thing. But the problem with that is the compatibility, like the way these things function is worse.
Yeah,
and the difference in quality between the products is so great. Whereas the iPhone, you know what you're getting. Something's kind of shitty, but it's the exact same kind of shitty it's always been, and they'll update it every year, make it cost like $500 more, and it'll be the same phone.
Yeah, it's like the Apple and PCs of the world. Like they don't. It's like you can't get anything to work. It's funny if you remember that movie. I always thought about this. The movie Independence Day, like Bill Paxton and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I forget the actor's name. The guy, the nerd guy that he does the apartment.
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum, and he's like pulling up with Will Smith in the spaceship or whatever, doing that. Like I'm sure Will Smith knows. And he uploads a virus to. I'm like, you an alien computer system. Like was it USB-C? Like you couldn't get a Mac and a PC to talk, but you can upload a virus to like an alien. I always thought about that. Like until we can get Macs and PCs to like talk, or your iPhone can talk to your Google Pixel. Screw that. You can't do that. Like that has to be an impossible task. Well, we can't even do this on Earth. We can't have two different systems talk to each other. Yeah. Let alone an alien. Yeah. So that was dumb.
Yeah. Did you ever see the second Independence Day?
I don't think so.
There was one, right?
Maybe. I'm not sure. We could do movie reviews.
Independence Day Resurgence. That was 2016.
Jeez.
Damn. It got 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
So, terrible.
Yeah, pretty terrible.
Okay. Well, speaking of terrible, here's our show.
Hey, oompa.
For David Woods, I'm Ryan Abraham. Hope you guys enjoyed this terrible show, and we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye.